What is the Beaufort Scale, and why is it important? I think I'll address the second question first with a different question. Is communication on a sailboat important? Of course it is, and even though this reference to wind conditions was developed and standardized in the early 1800s, it is still commonly used and referenced today. I'm going to show you why you can benefit from learning this method of reference to wind and sea conditions to leverage it on your boat for your own benefit. Hello, I'm Rear Admiral Francis Beaufort, and if you are interested in marine history, sailing, and boat maintenance, you visited the right channel. Let's start with a bit of history. Harumph, harumph! My favorite subject. This scale for characterizing wind and sea state was developed in the age of sail, when the English Navy was dominant on the high seas. Harumph, harumph, harumph! Prior to the development of this standard, ships' logs would be reviewed upon the return of the ship's captains from their respective voyages. Understanding what one captain's version of a moderate breeze versus another captain's version could be extremely inconsistent and tedious to decipher. I sought to remedy this situation by coming up with one set of definitions, and the particular beauty of it is that it was not based upon the readings of instruments or an arbitrary measuring system. It was based on visual identification of sea state and how wind strength affects sail configurations. Sound practical? It does to me. Harumph, harumph, harumph! Now by this standard, I would like to introduce you to force 4, which is defined as a moderate breeze. Consider this Beaufort level optimal conditions for sailing with all of your normal sails out. For a sloop, this means your mainsail and forward sail fully raised or unfurled. The magic number of 15 knots of wind can be found within force 4's range, the range between 11 knots and 16 knots, and the sea state is normally such that it does not inhibit a sailboat's speed or make things overly uncomfortable on deck. You can recognize this sea state on the ocean as relatively small waves between 3 and 5 feet, getting longer with whitecaps or foam on the tops of the waves forming relatively frequently. Leveraging the Beaufort Scale, you are expected to look at the sea and based on what you witness, determine what the wind strength is relative to the scale. The symbol that can be used on a map, graphic, or logbook for force 4 is a staff planted on a circle with 2 full bobs, where the staff tail end is pointed where the wind is coming from, and the circle at the base is opposite or in the direction of where the wind is headed to. How can this be used in practical terms, you might ask? Instead of communicating the wind speed of, say, 15 knots, which can fluctuate a bit higher or a bit lower, but communicating force 4, you immediately inherit a range of wind speed, and your sail configuration is pertinent within that range. Does it really matter if the wind is either 13 or 14 knots if it has no effect on your sail configuration? Force 4, much easier to communicate. Another reason this is useful is because you can use a single symbol to quickly record wind speed, direction, and sea state in a written form. I, for one, am a general advocate for maintaining a logbook, especially for an important passage. having to write out precise wind measurements, direction, and sea state in long form is rather tedious relative to capturing all this with just one symbol. Now on the ocean, you are extremely likely to experience either Force 4 or Force 5 conditions. In fact, you will likely find yourself within the range of these two levels 60% of the time. We've already covered the definition of Force 4. Let's briefly look at Force 5. Force 5 is defined as a fresh breeze with wind speed between 17 and 21 knots. The waves are moderately sized for ocean sailing at 6 to 10 feet with pronounced long form, where most are carrying foam on the top, and you might get some spray on the deck, especially when sailing into the wind. You might think of it as the wind would be enough to sway small trees. The symbol for a Force 5 is the same as the symbol for a Force 4, except it has 2 1/2 bobs rather than simply 2 bobs. If you can memorize the characteristics of these two levels of the Beaufort Scale, well, you are well on your way to a commanding understanding of the weather conditions you will experience most often. Moderate breeze, fresh breeze. Moderate breeze, fresh breeze. Expanding your knowledge beyond these two will just be plain fun, won't it? Harumph, harumph. I will note that shore stations dedicated to safety on the water will fly a singular red triangular flag when Force 6 or 7 are encountered. This is considered a strong breeze or near gale conditions, and if you had a fancy wind instrument, you would clock the wind between the ranges of 22 to 27 knots for a strong breeze and 28 to 33 knots for a near gale. A gale or severe gale will warrant 2 red triangular flags flying one above the other. These are Force 8 and 9. Force 10 and 11 will produce a red square flag with a black square in the center, and Force 12 will result in 2 such flags flying. I don't wish it on you to experience those sea conditions firsthand. Well, there you have it. Can I leave it to you then to spend more time on the scale and learn for yourself the levels I have left without comment? You will be the better sailor for it, I assure you. Well then, I will leave you my greatest wish for fair winds and following seas in your upcoming sailing adventures. Thank you for attending this video. Cheerio.